Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We're all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
Buckle up, everybody, because we are going into a dream, and then into another dream, and then into another dream, and then into another dream, because we're finally talking about a much requested movie, Christopher Nolan's Inception, y'all. So everybody get excited. Yes, get excited.
And Jinx.
And we also have a guest with us today who specializes in some of the concepts we'll be talking about. I mean, hopefully all of our guests specialize in the things we'll be talking about, but this feels especially nice to have someone here. So I will throw to him. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Isaac Taitz. I'm the president of All Mind Health and All Sleep Health, a clinical psychological services corporation in California. I specialize in helping patients get better sleep. And for those that do, we can also work on and utilize their dreams for their benefit to improve with anxiety, ADHD, trauma, and whatever else ails them. I present at Comic-Cons talking about the science and psychology of different topics, including the Sandman series, which is a very dreamy one that's connected to this one here. Fun fact, when Inception came out, I was actually doing my honors thesis back at Cornell on lucid dreaming. So I managed to get twice as many participants as I intended.
Very cool.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so let me try to explain Inception briefly for anyone who's listening who, for whatever reason, hasn't seen it. Basically, we're joining Leonardo DiCaprio as plays Dom, who... It's basically a heist movie, if you want to think about it like that. So he is the head of a heist in which they go into people's dreams and they steal from them in their dreams. So it's obviously a science fiction movie. So there's going to be some topics in there that we're going to try to make some sense of as much as you can within a science fiction movie. So we're going to be talking about dreaming and consciousness, kind of like the fact versus fiction. I'm also going to be talking a lot about that main character, Leonardo DiCaprio, Dom, and his deceased wife, Mal. That name, and basically trauma, grief, and shame. We've been really on a rip about trauma, grief, and shame in this show lately. Apologies. We didn't realize that every movie we've picked recently, somebody is dealing with the death of somebody very close to them. Because
in some kind of traumatic way.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's almost like that can be the impetus for so many great stories.
Yeah, it really is, though, the theme of this season.
Like every Disney movie ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or the origin of the best comic book hero that's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man.
You almost got me there. All right.
I was waiting for you to say Batman.
I didn't have to because...
You can't conjure it first, okay? You can't conjure it first.
Oh, I forgot.
See, my new game is to get you guys to say it before me, so you just fell into my trap.
Well,
Nightmare is a villain of Spider-Man on occasion.
That's true.
Oh.
That's true. So let's talk about this movie. This movie was definitely something that took over the imagination and the discussion point of the nation when it came out. I remember this one being one that people left the theater talking about. And it's not common that we get to see movies with people going like, my mind just broke. But this one didn't. Why do you guys think this one broke people's brains so profoundly that they actually left the theater going, what?
Well, I know this is kind of final thoughts territory, but just from, I think, the look of it, it felt like it happened at a perfect time, this movie, where you hadn't really, there was no Doctor Strange yet. Like, Marvel was still kind of kicking up in a big way. And so this movie visually was just so different than a lot of things that we had seen. And I think but going back to more, I think where you're asking, Ben, is dreaming is still something that is really mysterious to us. It's one of the things we can't control, really. And this idea that you could, I mean, lucid dreaming, sure, you can definitely, I don't know a lot about this stuff, so you can school me as much as you'd like, Isaac.
And I will.
Is, I think, just this idea that you can go into your dreams into a space where we're very vulnerable. And also, it's a good ass heist movie. Like, I think that's also part of why. But I think this idea that someone could go into your mind in this way, I think just wigs people out.
I mean, I certainly think so. Isaac and Hannah, what about you? What do you guys think? Why did this movie capture people's imagination and attention so hard? And Hannah's cats are interfering yet again.
Yeah, sorry.
Is mom paying attention to something other than us? God, that's not allowed.
Well, and she had a mini stroke a couple weeks ago, so she's a little weird. So
You mean
anyway,
like a
my cat.
petite mal seizure, perhaps?
Yeah.
Way to bring it into the movie.
Maybe.
Just waiting for that opportunity. But what definitely can capture people's attention, in addition to these kind of clever names, and we're going to hear a whole lot about how clever these names are in a little bit, but definitely the element of dreaming, which is so important, so integral. Everybody experiences this. This is one thing that unites all humans, is that we know what a dream is. We've experienced it. We may not remember it so much because we're working so late and we're barely getting any sleep, but that's a different issue altogether. And our dream worlds feel so fantastical to be able to see it represented in a pretty solid way on screen. Granted, I don't know if any of your dreams or nightmares have that bwah sound effect so often, but that also captures people's attention too, I imagine.
Well, Hannah listens to enough Hans Zimmer that I wouldn't be shocked if her dreams did have that sound in them.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's definitely a true thing. You know what's really funny is I didn't see this movie when everybody saw this movie. I saw this movie maybe like 5 years ago, roughly, something like that. Like, it's not a movie that I saw when it was really popular. So, but I would imagine just the idea of having something that talks so specifically about dreams in that way, and everybody's so interested in dreams in such a general way, that I feel like, of course, people were talking about it, because it's not something that, it's something that like people might ask you a question about if you're a therapist, because I get that question all the time. What about this dream I had? But also, it just seems like people are so interested in, they're just interested in talking about it. And I think it's fun to talk about in some ways too.
Hannah brings up an interesting point, which is, I'm reminded of the fact that you guys remember when you were little and you would see a movie and afterwards you'd be like, I want to be just like that character. Like, I'm going to do this thing like that character. Here, everybody gets a little bit of that again. Like, you get to kind of connect with that little child and be like, I could maybe do that in my dreams tonight. Maybe, like, I could literally do the thing in that. For all the crazy stunts that happen, like, oh, yeah, I shouldn't probably practice this at home. You know, I'm not a trained professional, but in your dreams, you could, you know, run around on the walls and the ceilings in some weird 0G situation, if you might.
Well, I'm really interested because I don't know a lot about this at all, because it's not my area of expertise. But I'm really interested in kind of what stands out in this movie as being like total BS in terms of dreaming and consciousness, and then what are things that, as like this field of expertise, or even I know that Ben, you also have gotten more into this stuff with like hypnosis and EMDR and that kind of thing. Like, what flags as like more realistic than you thought, and then what flags as like total BS? When I was watching this movie, all I could think is Freud would just eat this movie up or be totally enraged by this movie, one or the other. That's kind of the extent of the actual dreaming consciousness part, because that's just not a wheelhouse psychologically or therapeutically that I've delved into as a therapist.
Yeah, I could imagine Freud watching this. Nine, no, that doesn't fit.
Like, I haven't seen a single mother in this movie, but the one that killed herself sounds right. Like, that's would be his perspective, probably.
I think that he would probably say that nobody wanted a schwang. All they wanted was a schwingle. Anyway, I had to make a friend's reference for my wife. If she listens and I didn't do that, she would be mad at me.
Mhm.
So
Gotcha.
it had to, the Joey is Freud reference had to come through. But I think, that starting to look at this, Isaac, this is definitely your area of expertise. Tell us what kind of truths and what kind of nonsense did you see in this dream and within a dream heist movie?
So I'll start actually with the viral marketing that they put out about a year or so beforehand. Like I mentioned, I was working on my honors thesis at the time. And so I was researching different dream researchers and just trying to kind of, see who's doing what. And I saw a YouTube video of a few of the various members of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, of which now I'm a member. And I hear them talking about, lucid dreaming. How cool. Yeah, I want to study that. And then another character would appear on the screen. They didn't give a name. They didn't put a title card to that person, but she started to talk about how, we've been doing experiments with soldiers and getting them to enter into a shared dream, and they're actually able to communicate and engage with each other. And I almost lost it. And I was like, what? This is real? And I went to the comment section because you need to check just to be sure. And everyone's like, don't get too excited. This is viral marketing for a new movie coming out. I was like, oh man, but it sounds like a cool movie. So the element of being able to affect your dream, to be able to intentionally create some change or to kind of bring about some change in your dream, that's true. The aspect of lucid dreaming that we just mentioned before is your ability to be aware of yourself while you're in the dream and know that it's a dream and stay dreaming. Some people get too excited about it and then the adrenaline kicks in and then they wake up, so they can't really have fun. But to be able to maybe morph the setting of your dream or to teleport or to summon characters in your own dream, sure, that's been well researched and validated by a lot of studies, some of which include my own. So there's definitely something there. Whereas the ability to empirically enter into somebody else's dream, transmit information, and then have the other person know this without any other communication, we haven't been able to validate that just yet. But that's science. You can't prove anything, or you can't disprove anything. You can only prove it. So far, that's where we're at. I've had personal experiences where I believe I've been able to communicate some information with a friend of mine. But then again, if you're friends, you know each other well enough, you kind of get the vibes of each other. Eventually you would be like, well, what would my friend think of this situation? And maybe you'll dream of it. So that's one aspect that gets more on the science fiction side of things. In addition, this concept of dreams within of dreams, which in the field are called nested dreams, kind of like a Russian nested doll. The old field, colloquially we used to call them like false awakenings, but we don't want to kind of disqualify what awareness or awakening you may have in your mentality, so we call them nested dreams. Those happen. You guys have probably had or remember them, where you wake up and you think that you're in your bedroom and you go and you start your day, and then something happens. You wake up again.
Right.
Ooh, it's annoying.
It's the worst.
Yeah, it could be.
Sucks.
Or you can see it as like a take two, or a second chance. You missed something. You forgot something. Oh, cool. I didn't actually embarrass myself in front of the class while presenting on something without my pants on. I actually get to remember to put on pants today. Good job.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no better feeling than waking up from a dream in which something horrific is happening to realize that it's not happening. I mean, your body still needs a time to like chill out, and you have to keep like reassuring it that it's not going on. But I know what you mean. Like, it's an opportunity to reframe your thinking of it.
I was going to say, I think it's really important to highlight what you said about the body, because if you've been listening to this show, or one of my clients who might listen in, that I'm going to hyper focus on understanding the relationship that your brain lives in your body, that the mind-brain connection and the division between those is much less significant than 16th century philosophers would have us argue, because the brain is an organ that is in your body, literally wired in to your entire body through the nervous system. So recognizing that even if you've had a dream, that it is vitally important to calm your body down. And I'm talking from experience because I've done this, had a dream where I thought something was happening that was bad, and then woke up and literally needed to actually calm my physical body down in my awake form because I was still not convinced that the bad was not happening. And that was because my nervous system was going bananas, because my adrenaline, as Isaac mentioned, was firing. And it's really important that we have kindness for ourselves, for particularly people who suffered trauma, that deal with nightmares, that you recognize the importance that calming your body back down and can regrounding to the reality you're in are separate but processes that must be done at the same time. I wanted to say separate but simultaneous, but that doesn't even make sense, so I can't say it out loud. But like my brain wouldn't even let me say it. But the concurrent processes you must do, right? Like, you got to do both. You got to calm your body down, and you got to ground to reality.
Similarly, how we can tell what reality we're in, waking reality versus dreaming reality, can be done by a very mindful check of your space. In fact, lucid dreaming is positively correlated with mindfulness. So there are such checks that we can use to tell whether we're awake or whether we're dreaming. Things that we've empirically had people go into dreams and test and then, signal or communicate upon waking. So some of them actually do involve the body, like our hands. In dreams, they tend to be very malleable. We might have extra fingers. They may be blurred. They may be very malleable. You can stretch them like rubber. For any One Piece fans out there might recognize that one. But in essence, they're so, outside in our periphery, they appear to be very blurred anyways. But you always have your hands on. You can always test that in what is still called reality checks, state checks, but you're checking which reality you're in. But you do reality dream. There's others out there too.
If I saw Brittany smile, I'm going to have to tell you that when you started talking about fingers being malleable, I just saw Brittany's brain. I saw right into it, directly into. We had a shared dream right now where I saw Brittany's mind go into Beetlejuice.
No, I was thinking about One Piece. His One Piece reference, not to poop on your thing you're saying.
No, Brittany. Oh, wait, are shared dreams bullshit? Damn.
Well, no.
I just said that.
And also why I was smiling.
Didn't just say that.
Also why I was smiling is because I had a close friend and roommate who used to lucid dream, and she used to have like scary dream. Like, so she did some research into it to try to like help herself, and she realized what could help her kind of start to get out of it. Is that she noticed that her blinds, she had up and down blinds, like slanted, and that when the dreams, they would be horizontal. And so once she noticed that, it would start kind of kicking off a thought process in her brain that this isn't real. And then it would allow her, and then she learned that if she like threw her arm up, tried to throw her arm up in her dream, it would wake her up. It would like jostle her awake because she used to have, and they used to always be not about me, but she would always describe these dreams, and I'd be like, I sound like I'm just crawling into your room in the middle of the night and like scaring you. Like, so she would have really unsettling dreams, and and she learned how that trick that you were saying to kind of help her bring her out of it.
Yeah, she noticed what are her dream signs, and each individual will have their own unique dream signs. That's why if you do want to lucid dream or just get to know your own brain better, journaling your dreams regularly, and then you can see, okay, what's a common thread? What's a common dream-like element that keeps on coming up? For her, it was the blinds. Other people might see a big red dog. So whenever, they see any of these common themes in waking life, they can start to do a check. So every time, they hear about Clifford, they do a reality check. Okay, nope, I'm in waking reality. And eventually it becomes a habit, and you may catch yourself in the dream. But like Ben was saying, you got to calm yourself down because it's still you in that dream. If you get too excited, just like most things in life, we get too excited and we ruin it for ourselves.
So you're saying that the shared dream concept in the movie, you said you haven't proven it yet.
I haven't, definitely, and neither has the field has not like empirically proven it just yet.
Gotcha. Well, and also because in the movie they make it seem like they have to rely on I can't remember what chemicals I heard them say, if they named anything specifically, but I know there's a heavy reliance in the movie on chemicals to get you into this heavily sedated place, but also into that sort of shared dreaming space. Like you kind of got to pick whose brain everyone kind of fell into, if you will.
Yeah, it looks like that was what that machine is for, that the one dreamer got plugged in and then the other ones. And I don't think they named chemicals either. I think the chemist that they talked to, I was noticing that specifically did not name chemicals, but talked about making sure whatever he formulated did not affect the inner ear so that they could still use the kick. But maybe they did talk about chemicals and I missed it because I'm really...
No, they didn't. No. I paid attention today.
Yeah. And I think Christopher Nolan did a good job in writing a sci-fi movie, which is that you don't give too much information. You give just enough information and exposition so that it makes sense, but you don't get so caught up in the reasoning behind it that everyone gets bored or starts picking it apart. Like, I think that's where Tenet got a little nutso, is like it got too in the weeds with a lot of things. But I think Inception did a good job of being like, well, you need these chemicals. There's a chemist. Just trust that. And let's keep the story moving.
Yeah.
The movie that this actually was inspired by, called Paprika, was an animated Japanese animated film that Nolan had actually made mention he had seen before and was inspired to make Inception based off of. It has a similar concept of characters entering into others' dreams. And the protagonist, she was working on this dream catcher device, but it was some, futuristic tech that you put on, around your ear, and allowed a therapist to enter into a patient's dream or individuals to share dreams. So this is kind of the unobtainium. This is the MacGuffin that they can use to kind of explain this component without any chemical explanation, because they knew that everyone would, there'd be one scientist in the audience calling out, nope, that's wrong. That's not
Neil
how that
deGrasse
works.
Tyson would be on Twitter talking about why it didn't make sense.
Sure.
Those guys are the worst. I watched National Treasure with some guy, and he's like telling us the whole movie about one shot in the movie that ruined it for him. We're like, dude, we know this is nonsense. Like it's Nicolas Cage being Indiana Jones in America. Okay, we know. And I agree. I think it was important that we didn't get into the weeds with chemicals, because then the, geeks of the world like us right now would be sitting here and doing this, talking about it. But so we kind of covered that the premise of the movie is a little bit wonky, but it's really fun to consider as go ahead.
Yeah, and because it is a dream-based movie, and like in dreams, we suspend our disbelief. We allow ourselves to go with whatever the narrative of the dream is telling us, and be like, I have to build a go-kart with my old landlord. Okay. And so we get to follow that dreamy state into the movie, and we don't need to question it so much. Most dream narratives is just a tool to tell a story anyways. So we get to follow this one. We don't need to challenge it so much.
Right, which I think is an important part, and I'm going to just share my bias here and make some people really mad and other people really happy, is I think that's what makes Star Wars more fun and more successful than Star Trek is.
How dare you?
See, already did it. I'm right. One's made billions of dollars, one's made millions. There's a reason. But that suspension of disbelief of, well, let's just kind of skip over some of the deep science and go right into what makes this interesting, is a powerful tool to use with dreams. And also when you're doing anything like hypnosis that works with people's layers of consciousness, because at some point relying on metaphor to let the brain fill in the gaps becomes important. That I'm not telling you all of the answers. I'm creating a scenario and letting your brain be curious about it so that it fills in things by itself. That was some of the things that Dom said to Tom Hardy's character that I thought was fascinating. Or maybe it was maybe that was him and Elliot Page. I can't remember. But talking about not making things. No, it was about the bridge. Don't use things that are too real.
Could be memories.
Right. Don't use actual memories, but use things that are shades of this, or inspired by, but not actually from it, because then it gets too real and it can ground it to something. And I think that's really important. And I imagine that's important with the dream work you guys do, is making sure too, like, don't make it too real, because then the suspension of disbelief that we need in dreams and to do any kind of subconscious work doesn't happen.
Definitely. What you were mentioning about allowing some kind of wiggle room for the client or the patient to fill in the gaps, that's exactly how modern dream work utilizes it. It's more of a humanistic approach. Let them be their experts.
And I know for me, I don't do a lot of work with sleep. I'm not big into dream or sleep work, but I do talk to clients and create space for them to talk about their dreams and what the recurrent themes may be. And I don't do that kind of work simply because I just don't know. I'd be operating outside of my realm of expertise, is why I'm really glad we have Isaac on for this, because it is his expertise, and this is great. What I do understand is working with people's layers of consciousness, which this movie sort of borrowed from and then put into dreams. Like, even in hypnosis states, you can measure people's brain waves, and you need to understand that when you get to different layers of brainwave, and I'm going to have to pull up a chart because this is a little also beyond the training we get as counselors, but when people are in gamma waves, their brainwaves are operating. I'm making finger signs, like you guys can see what I'm doing. The brainwaves are really active.
This
is a visual media. Well, if people on Patreon, maybe, but the gamma waves are when we're in problem solving. The brainwaves are operating in a high frequency pattern. When we're awake with an active mind, that's beta waves. When we're relaxed and reflective, alpha. Theta is drowsiness, and delta is when we get dreams and sleeping. And hypnosis wants to increase theta waves and delta waves to try to engage people at a lower level of consciousness where they're more suggestive and reflective. That's something that's really important, that you can get the body in a measurable way and a provable way to be in a state where the mind is more willing and to be flexible and calm, because the body is safe. The body is grounded in safety. The body is grounded in calmness. And by creating that environment, drawing attention to it, the mind can be more flexible and creative and allow for problem solving that can't exist when it's grounded to a real problem when you're trying to solve something. If there was a tiger in your house, you are not going to be so interested, or even not even possible for you to wonder, is it possible to go into a shared dream within a dream, within a dream, within a dream? And what would it be like if I went into my friend's dream and got into their head? Would we be able to solve world puzzles together? No, you're going to be worried about a motherfucking tiger in your house about to eat you, because your brain's going to be going, danger, 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 danger. And when you do any kind of work with a client who has anxiety or has a history of trauma, which through my lens, everyone has trauma, but not everyone has PTSD. We've all had small T traumas, things that disturb us. You have to get the body back to a state where it can be calm again, so that you can help someone reach a state of consciousness where they're able, not willing, physically able to be suggestible, to interpret the information through a different lens. If you're activating the part of them that was in danger with the memory, their body is in danger. And the things I reject about doing cognitive behavioral therapy with trauma patients directly is that it relies on this idea, well, help them, tell them to think about it differently and they'll be fine.
So I actually utilize cognitive behavioral therapy, and I approach the trauma work with more of a maybe a polyvagal neural approach that actually can coincide with yours. In essence, allowing them to activate the cognitions that are connected not to those fears, the emotions, and memories, two of the main components of dreams. The pyramidal cells, the hippocampus are in charge of kind of person, place, and context. And we have the amygdala activated and engaging with memory consolidation there. So when we have a traumatic experience, capital or lowercase, those neurons between the fear and the memory are fused very strong. They're very fine-tuned. And unfortunately, that's where we get our flashbacks. That's why we have our reoccurring dreams and nightmares of the event. So the approach that I'll use, at least initially, is to cultivate their ability to connect to memories of safety, to get them to intentionally go to that memory, to feel it somatically, to kind of remember all of the sight, sounds, touch, taste, etc., so that they can feel safe again, and cultivate that from the past, recent past, present, and future, so they're eventually able to essentially grow their brain in this new direction that they'd like to do. And we might see similar changes happening in the dream space. There are some dream-based interventions to change or to add in novel experiences to the dreamed experience of those neurons firing. And when we can bring in the more bizarre elements of dreaming, it gets to move away from the traumatic reproduction of that traumatic event. So because we can get dreams to be more bizarre and getting more elements, we get to broaden and build. That's the parasympathetic nervous system, as opposed to that fight or flight or freeze response we get when we are or traumatized.
And I love that you mentioned the blending of the techniques, because it's not that CBT is an invalid approach. CBT is validated over and over again. It works. But where it doesn't work, where it falls short, is when the part of the brain that can't activate and doesn't have those resources, right? When that sympathetic nervous state is, our nervous system is active, people aren't calm enough to engage the things they've been taught. And the memory they're activating that you're saying is physically stored in their neurons does not have those resources at that time. And therefore that information is irrelevant until they're calm again. And that's what I think is so important that people miss. I think I was 10 years into my career before I finally took trainings that concretized that for me. And I'm EMDR certified. So that's where, like, you know, EMDR pulls heavily from polyvagal. They don't even, shy away from that. They incorporate that idea that we need to keep in mind, like I said earlier, that the brain and the body are all wired into each other, and how memories are stored matters. Where they're stored matters. We can't just tell someone to change the way that they're thinking when their body is telling them they're in danger. Doesn't work.
Are you trying to say that the body keeps the score or something?
I might be saying that the body keeps the score. God.
I wonder too, I've just been listening, and I wonder, in just listening to what you guys are sharing and what I know about clients I see who have trauma and then it comes out in their dreams, or even with myself, because I have anxiety, and how my anxiety will so stereotypically manifest in my dreams. And so my only thought about this, and this is what I would say if I was Christopher Nolan, just to, be lazy, is, well, one of the chemicals that they get injected with must take care of this part of it. But I don't know how all of these people in this movie, aren't, when they're in each other's subconscious, when they're in each other's dream state, how they're so activated. Obviously, they're fighting for their lives, like in these dreams within dreams, right, that it does seem kind of outlandish that there wouldn't be more going on within their dream states besides just Dom and Mal, right? And these subconscious sort of like armies or fighters that are coming towards them. Like, you would think that there would be more manifestations of their, I guess, neuroses, if you want to call it that, or their undealt with feelings, or even just, you would think in one of the dreams, there'd be manifestations of the anxiety they're having in the upper dream, like in the, what I would call the business hotel dream, that there wouldn't be stuff coming up in the snow dream because of that. And my assumption would be, if I was Christopher Nolan, I would just say, well, one of those chemicals shooting into their brains is, I don't know, Lexapro or something, and or Ativan or something that's like keeping their anxiety low so they can be so centered and grounded while their body and brain is doing a million other things that are so stressful simultaneously. Like, it makes me curious if these henchmen or heist people in this movie have to do their own like meditative grounding process-based work between heists just so that heists don't go awry. Like all the elements that they feel like they have to that you have to control in this space. That to me almost feels like the most unrealistic part of this movie is how could things not be like the most that something goes awry, if I would even say that, and they catch it right away, is in the business hotel dream, layer of the dream, Robert's actual godfather shows up that they were going to imitate, and then they kind of use that to their advantage. But you think there would be more stuff going on like that they wouldn't be able to predict for. And I'm assuming, I'm just going to give it up to the suspension of disbelief, because this is obviously reality, an alternate reality where this is so well known that businessmen like Robert are being trained on how to deal with it. Like there's already security businesses to deal with these things, and probably mercenaries and all that stuff too. But I think that's the part that, I find really interesting, that only Dom is the one having trouble keeping control over a part of his psyche that's manifesting and sabotaging these dream states.
I agree. I love your framing of that question, because I think that ties into what Isaac was talking about earlier about how you can't stay in a dream state and can't lucid dream once your adrenaline starts firing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that you're just not going to stay in a sleep state. It's not going to happen because your body's going to wake you up.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, your body's going to say you're in danger, wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's designed that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's almost like if there was a tiger in your house and you heard a roar, your body
would wake you up. Yeah.
We have a problem here. But
exactly.
I think
it's more personal.
Right. That would be that's a really important question, because there is no way all of these characters have not had lives. And, as Freud would say, mothers, right? Like,
and I would also say you don't get into that line of business, crime, without I would assume a significant background of stuff going on in your life. That you would be, I don't know, it makes me curious if there's like a psych workup that you have to clear to be part of these teams of like to do these heists, which I guess they don't, because they recruit Elliot Page's character just because that character is the brightest kid in class.
Unless all of these characters are elements from the level above all of that. We don't get to see whether or not that top falls at the end.
I know.
Whether or not Dom was dreaming all of these scenes, whether there's all one big metaphor of his, very extreme dream that he had after a really powerful therapy session.
Well, this is going to lead into a whole nother conversation. We're going to take a break here and we'll be right back. All right. So you can we'll definitely keep weaving in like dreaming, consciousness, fact versus fiction into this. But I think you're bringing up the next portion of this, which is that there is the argument that this whole movie is a dream, perhaps, that Dom is having, right? And it makes sense to me, because he is the central figure, because it's only his manifestation that is fucking shit up, right? And also, a note that I wrote is how perfect that he's given the opportunity to reframe Inception, to reframe the awful thing he did to his wife, to reframe it in a positive way, where he not only is like the hero and doing something exceptional, but he is going to be cleared of all wrongdoing. He's going to see his children again. He's going to be safe. I think it's what you, Ben, would have called in recent episodes a corrective experience. He gets to now use something he did that had led to a horrible, horrific, traumatic outcome that he's been sitting with, all that guilt and shame. And now he's this perfect opportunity to use it in a way that'll solve everything. So I did touch on that, and I was like, oh, that does feel like, that could just be like the narrative of the story, right? The hero's story. And it feels like a perfect sort of like reframing experience to reconceptualize something like a piece of huge guilt that you're holding inside of you.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think that's a huge point to make, that there's so many things that open up that question, right? It is, of all these characters, like taking a look at Tom Hardy's character, Eames, right? That dude is operating at legit special forces level, like single man incursion tactics. And you don't learn that stuff without some serious bad coming your way. You know, like you're going to have to put yourself through really, really difficult training and do really difficult things that will have consequences on you. Not saying, you know, that these people are bad people, but saying that they train in hard ways for hard realities that most of us can sleep through the night and pretend don't exist because there are people who do them. And to do those kinds of things, the argument that his subconscious would have its own version of Maul showing up to haunt him. I've done way too much work with people that have killed people to believe for 1 ounce of a second would not be there. So that it's only Dom's memories that get corrected, that it's only Dom's memories that show up and interfere. I think the argument exists that the top never would fall. That this will
similarly.
Oh, go ahead.
Similarly speaking, I work with a lot of vets and service members, and their PTSD also comes with a large amount of nightmares. And for however much training that they do get, there's not a lot in the realm of mental fortitude and health and security, especially against these traumatic experiences, whether they've committed anything, whether they've witnessed anything, or even just heard about anything. Trauma can come at you, you know, even by word of mouth. And they're so severely affected by it. So once again, we have to suspend disbelief that such individuals would not be haunted by their actions in the past if they are actually real people and not just conglomerations of Dom's mind.
Right. Which, you know, the operating theory seems to be all of us kind of are on that team.
I mean, it's just fun to think that it's all. Well, I was kind of more watching this, and me and Hannah watched it together. So we were talking about this because Hannah, you kept noting every time, well, he's been the top this time, and the top did fall. So you kept like clocking.
I was paying attention.
But I do think where this movie feels really interesting to me psychologically is if you do, which is regardless of it's his dream the whole time or whatever, what is true in the movie is that Maul is him, right? It's a manifestation of him talking at him, right? Coming at him, if you will. And if you really hold that in your mind, the whole movie, psychologically for me as a therapist, that all lined up. Like the fact that during one of their first interactions in the movie, it might have been where they're in Saito's mind in the beginning, and she shows up, she says to him, "Do the children miss me?" Which is such a brutal question. And he says, "Oh God, I can't imagine." And that to me, now that I like know the whole story because I've seen it a few times, I'm like, oof, that does feel like something a client's, your subconscious would haunt on you. Like those would be the kind of questions that you would torture yourself about. And this idea of Mal walking around as this punishing, self-sabotaging, toxic, hateful creature in his life does make a lot of sense to me as a therapist who has worked with so many people who have gone through something where they feel like not only a trauma, but a trauma that feels like it was my fault. Because I think that's the important thing. So we've talked about a lot of trauma on the show lately, a lot of trauma through grief and loss and bereavement. And I think what's important to keep in mind with this one is this, what's different for this character is that he believes that he is the one who did this to her, that he caused her death.
It's interesting that you bring up specifically bereavement because that was actually my dissertation topic for grad school. I did a dissertation on the cultural differences in bereavement dreams. And so I looked at how do different groups of individuals dream of the deceased? Does this change by ethnicity, religion, or gender? And the more conclusive evidence was that it's mainly just by gender. The most women tend to dream of the deceased either being happy and healthy and radiant, kind of doing well, or being separated and kind of separating or kind of saying goodbye, things like that. As in waking life, the grief process can be very socially straining for most women. And they, either feel the loss very strong or they need a lot of social connection. Whereas most men tend to dream of the deceased essentially doing kind of the mundane things that they always used to do together. So if they used to kind of sit and chat at the breakfast table, that's what they'll probably see them doing. If they used to go on walks, then they'll probably continue to go on walks with them. So if that's true, that means that maybe Dom's either relationship with Mal either has always been, or he's at least perceiving it as reprimanding. Unless it is so traumatic, so excessive that it is shifting and changing. And this is that traumatic element that his brain is showing him. Little column A, little column B.
Yeah, it's like this whole movie creates a lot of metaphor to parts, or allegory perhaps, but looking at how all of these could be parts of Dom, and that Mal represents that shame part, because she never says one single positive thing to him.
No,
not ever.
Never.
And Arthur, the character of Arthur, he does say to Ariadne, like, Mal was lovely in real life. So I think that is the clue to us as the audience, that this version of Mal is not the version of Mal that existed in the real world, or at least not until maybe they fell into limbo together and she came back with him.
Right. And some of the work that I've done, I even wrote about this in my in the Stranger Things psychology book. I wrote a chapter in with understanding the role of shame in recovery from trauma and grief, in bereavement even, is that when people believe that they contributed, they have responsibility for the loss, healing becomes blocked, because shame deactivates the arousal state that's needed to emote enough to grieve. And we see Mal every time there is some completion of this task that Dom has created for himself, Mal shows up and blocks it. And I see that with clients in session over and over again, where they get so close to reaching that point, they can release. They can have that cathartic release of emotion that they need in order to grieve, that they go, no, but it's my fault. Boom. But I did it. There's something I did, something about it, my fault, or I can't recover. Bam. The shame shuts it right down, and the healing loop starts all over again.
Yeah, I mean, Ariadne says it at towards the end of the movie. She says, you're going to have to forgive yourself, because that character does a good job of kind of getting right to it. I mean, I'd also be interested in your guys' thoughts about the levels of the dreams, when he's that elevator kind of metaphor they use in the movie, where Ariadne goes through them. But that character quickly picks up on the fact that, like, your shame is like eating you up. And not only is it eating you up, it's going to eat all of us up with you, because we are now part of your shame spiral. And I think what you're saying, Ben, is so true. And when I work with clients and the shame, it keeps blocking us time and time again, so the question I sometimes ask them is, why does it feel so important to keep punishing yourself? Like, what do you think you're genuinely gonna, this is I have to ask myself this question sometimes too, which is hard. Like, what function does it continue to serve? Like, why does it feel so necessary to hold on like this? What do I feel like I'm going to lose if I actually forgive myself? What's the worry on the other side of forgiving myself, that you're going to do something, or you're going to say something, you're going to be someone if you don't keep, punishing yourself? And I have to always acknowledge that we live in a culture that also very much not rewards shame, but it has this belief that shame has a lot of merit, right? Like discipline and no pain, no gain. Like, we do live in a culture that does really, I mean, you could probably, blame it on puritanical culture. This idea that shame keeps us in line, shame keeps us good boys and girls. And so what I do also have to acknowledge sometimes, what I have to acknowledge sometimes with clients is there real fear or worry or anxiety that if I don't keep punishing myself, that I'm going to start doing bad things. I mean, it's that like simplistic kind of the thought process. I don't even know if they could name what the bad things are if we really got there. Not always, sometimes not always. I work with. And it's more just like this hovering hypothetical for some people of like, well, I'm a bad person, which is what shame tells us. And so if I let go, then, or if I forgive myself, then I'm opening up a door because I don't trust myself that I'm gonna just be a good, like I'm gonna be a moral, ethical person, which is also the big, not to get on a soapbox, but I think the big argument that you see with people when people talk about, do we need a religion or not to stay in line? I think it also, people who think that you don't need religion will say the same thing, which is that, do you not think that you can still make ethical, moral decisions without this worry that you're going to get punished by something bigger than us if you don't behave? And it goes back to this idea of, can you like trust yourself, forgive yourself after a horrible situation in which maybe you do have some fault in it, maybe not, maybe you do, and then how do we move forward?
To that end, there's an approach that combines this parts work that we're talking about here. Part of it could be, pun unintended, part of it could be engaging with your different dream characters as different parts of you. That's called Gestalt dream psychology, kind of acknowledging that this is all you. You're projecting these different characters into your dream. Your mirror neurons that normally are receptive in waking life are projective in the dreaming world. So you project elements of you into your dream characters. You can interact with them, ask them questions, engage with them. Just in my experience, asking them what's it like to be my dream character, and then they just kind of give up the game, and they're like, I don't know. But in waking life, in addition, we can also do internal family systems therapy. There's an approach where we get, if shame is coming up so much, and it served us as a child, it kept us kind of, okay, well, I don't want the group to dislike me, so I'll feel shame when I say something awkward or wear the wrong socks, and so it keeps us in line. Sure, but most things can be helpful to a degree, and when they become unnecessary or maladaptive, we need to analyze them. So I'll work with a patient and ask them, all right, can you connect with your shame? What service does it provide for the whole? And can we maybe even ask that part what it would rather do? Or if it let you take over from there, if it let you kind of keep the system in order. And some amazing work happens when the patient finally acknowledges, you know what, yeah, I was feeling ashamed. It kept me from doing the bad thing again. But now I think I know not to do the bad thing again. And I can start to move forward from that. And then they get to grow again.
So Hannah, I'm going to tap you. I'm going to do the tag in here because Isaac said the magic word, right? Like we probably pretty much almost have a bingo for those listening. We've talked about Batman. We've talked about trauma. We've talked about grief. And we've talked about Star Wars. One of the other themes that we've talked about, because definitely both Hannah and I talk about parts a lot, is how might Dom have manifested Maul and some of these other characters as parts, do you think, Hannah? Because I know this is definitely an area of interest of yours, is dealing with parts work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like as I'm listening to all of you talk about it being the whole deal is this is his dream and this is his experience. That makes a lot more sense to me in terms of just how I think about the movie in general. So I really feel like clearly his shame part is Mal. I feel like I don't even know if this, based on all the different things you all were talking about, I don't even know if this works, but his subconscious being Ariadne, or however the fuck you say her name, or their name in the movie, the character's
Don't offend
name,
our Greek client or our Greek listeners, Hannah.
Either way, that is kind of the part that's like, are you sure about this? Like, is this really like this? It's also the part that is showing him very clearly, no, this is what the problem is. You need to forgive yourself. You need to walk away from the situation because this is dangerous. Like, you continuing to engage with the shame part of yourself is not, you're not growing from this. Nothing is changing, which is kind of what all of you are saying. So I really feel like the shame part is Maul. I feel like his maybe introspection part is Elliot Page's character. I feel like I don't know if I feel like I can identify any other parts. I mean, it certainly could be Tom Hardy could be his fight part. Number one. That could be a part of that experience.
Well, I mean, he has to go to Mogadishu to find him, like it's that's his operator for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, and I feel like in some ways then Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, I feel like I don't know anybody's name. I only know the actors. Arthur.
Eames is Tom Hardy.
Yeah, I feel like Arthur, his part is kind of, he might be the protector, but a kind of like a protector that's given up in one way or another. Like he seems to be able to come to him and say, are you sure you have a handle on this? Are you sure that you're able to do this? Are you sure that you're able to, do you have this under control? Kind of checks in with him. So I don't know what part I think that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is maybe.
Well, I want to jump off of that. In what's interesting, now that we're kind of thinking of it in this hypothetical, is Arthur, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, seems to be very, very type A. I guess I'll put it like that. And he makes a big mistake that makes the whole mission really in danger, right? So it also, I guess you could kind of argue, like, is this movie a representation of Dom kind of finally saying, like, it's not working anymore? Like, the way that I've been trying to do it is not working anymore. I can't plan for everything. I can't be ahead of everything. That rigidity that we all can fall into when we're trying to pretend like we can have a lot of control over the world around us. And so that does seem to be a moment in the movie where Arthur's character is really out of character, that it's really shocking. And of course, Dom reacts in kind. He screams in his face. And he's also like, we can't change though. Like, we still have to push forward, which that's also something I think that's really realistic, right? Is that until shit gets really, really, really bad, we can struggle to swerve. We can get very locked in till, no, we have to complete the mission. We got to do the way we've always done it. We can't move, even though we are in like dire straits. We'll fall into limbo, even though I've pissed off everybody on the team. Because I think something Dom also does is keep a lot of secrets. He's very secretive with his team. He does not tell them things if he does not want them to know. It's very like rules for thee, but not for me, which they even name outright in the movie. Like, you'll know, they say, I think, quote, like they say verbatim, you'll notice that Dom tells you to do a lot of things, not to do a lot of things that he'll then do.
Yep. I think that
so
was
get
Eames'
used to that.
best line. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot about the theory that we're in Dom's head the whole movie, because we keep secrets from ourselves. Because I think how also this movie resolves is him, I guess, reconcile. If we're thinking about like parts, like he reconciles with that Elliot Page part of, of kind of finally saying out loud to someone what he did, the part that he played. Because the feeling that I got, unless I really missed something, which I wouldn't be shocked, is that he's never really told anybody, maybe Arthur, but I feel like no one, that he put an idea in his wife's mind that led to her, I guess you could argue, psychosis, that led to her suicide, right? If you want to think of it in those terms. And it's in the end of the movie, how he can finally move on and like resolve things is he finally admits that out loud, kind of like the big exhale of the movie. This is what I did. And he doesn't, nothing, I'm going to say it like this, but nothing bad happens. Like he says the big horrible thing out loud and the world doesn't explode,
Weird.
I know, right?
Like when you admit to these things that you've held in yourself for so long and you think are so terribly bad that your shame system has kind of wrapped up and hold itself away and made you think you have to think this way. Whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's trauma. But if we can finally get to just check in with somebody and say, hey, listen, my brain's been telling me this thing a whole bunch, and I'm just going to say it out loud. And the other person is a, qualified therapist of some sort, can tell you, yeah, it do be that way. It sucks, doesn't it? And you're like, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Then you get to move on.
Right. But we don't like immediately send you to an execution chamber of like, oh, you said that thing? Whew.
Yeah.
I've got a jacket
Sorry.
to fit for you.
I
Right.
mean, any
Yeah,
tip
you're
for
done.
any therapist in training out there listening? When your client tells you something really hardcore like that, you have to practice making your face very stoic and calm
Mhm.
and compassionate. Do
Yes.
not make
Not
a goofy big face or a yikes face, which is
No,
what
li-
Isaac just kind of made. Yee.
or like the Leonardo DiCaprio, just kind of squint face at him, really look at
Yeah.
him hard.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, especially that. So there's something I wanted to follow up on this because Brittany, you're talking about great stuff, and Isaac and Hannah, you guys have both talked about great stuff. So I'm going to do the thing that I do sometimes and kind of concretize this back into some of the theoretical language to help tie it in. Is Isaac, you brought up IFS, which is internal family systems. And I don't use his language a lot, but I'm going to today because it's simpler. I like structural dissociation. I like Janina Fisher's way of talking about things a little bit more because it's a little more expansive. But the way that Dick Schwartz did it, who's the creator of internal family systems, the way he wrote these things was in simpler, direct language, and his focus is getting the self part back online. That's his focus. Some other people focus on some different stuff in addition to that and build upon that work. But the language that he uses in the base levels, right, is that within our internal family system, we have managers, firefighters, and exiles. So when Hannah and Brittany are kind of like naming out these parts, and Isaac using the language and explaining this too, like you guys have to, I'm hoping that our audience right now is starting to see these characters for what they are. And Isaac, your term of like, maybe this is a really powerful therapy session is where my brain is at with this. It's not just a dream. It's a really powerful therapy session. Is the managers are Arthur, and also we see, I forgot his father-in-law, Michael Caine, whatever his character's
I
name
don't know
is.
if we ever learn. If we do learn his name, it's very fleeting.
It is very
Alfred.
fleeting. Alfred.
Good one.
See, I'm here for this. He definitely was Daddy Butler here. But we see the managers, right? The managers who try to keep stuff. And I don't know if it's Hannah or Brittany who said like the Arthur is like a manager that's kind of like given up. It's kind of like, I'm going to run this stuff, but like, I'm not going to try to control you
Or
anymore.
almost just like wore out. Like I
Yeah.
can't keep operating at this level, dude.
Right.
We're cracking.
And then
Yeah.
the firefighters, we see like Eames.
Mm-hmm.
Eames is a firefighter, and
So hot.
I know
He
you
looks
tell
so
me.
good in this movie. It's
I'm
amazing.
surprised you guys don't like. He's like very cleaned up. He's not all crimed up, and he.
I like him a little bit better when he talks like that.
The way that Christopher Nolan will hide his face in movies is hater behavior, and I'm glad in Inception he does not do that.
Lets him be the beautiful man that he is. Anyway,
Yes.
Yeah.
So you see, Eames is a firefighter. The chemist is kind of sort of a blend of firefighter and manager, kind of because he's kind of taking on a couple different roles. And then the exiles, Ariadne is an exile. When looking at it, as you know, I go, and Isaac, when you dropped IFS on it, I'm like, already been thinking this way, but then it concretized for me. So the way they're described is vulnerable, usually young parts that hold trauma, fear, and shame that are shut away to keep them safe, but also to stop them from overwhelming the system. So here's why the interaction of parts makes sense for me watching this story. And then I'll share a factoid about this movie that I learned this weekend watching it, is the manager part of the father-in-law of Alfred Daddy Butler in Brittany and Hannah's language was introducing Dom the self to a younger, better version of him. Remember, he tells him, I've got someone better. He is interacting with an idealized version of himself that can do all of the things he can do and is operating a memory. That bridge memory concretized it for me. This is exactly where my brain went when I watched it this time. I went like, son of a bitch, that character is him. Is that memory using that bridge that then Maul shows up on, ties all this theory together, because yes, she walks over that bridge every day to school to go to what I'm assuming is Oxford, but watching the way Maul shows up and the whole world starts to break when that bridge is used and Dom realizes where he is the parts starting to interact and talk with each other. But watching how Dom interacts with the exiled part of himself that he still believes is good enough and has the skills to get him out of this, but stays isolated from the self by the shame, is exactly what we see illustrated in that the shame comes in and disrupts the connection of self and exiled part that is protected, because that is where his hopes and dreams lie. And it's the same problem we run into with clients where they are given the opportunity to connect to what EMDR would call a resource memory. And you get them almost activated enough that they feel enough hope that they can overcome again and feel engaged. But shame shows its face again and destroys it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is the factoid you were going to say, Ben, but it's something I had mentioned before we started recording, is that character's name is Greek for creator of dreams, Ariadne's. That's why that name, I think, is kind of anachronistic sounding, which is why it's not rolling off the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
So if that character is a creation of Dom, it makes sense then that why they would have this pretentious ass name with this pretentious ass meaning, which could just be Christopher Nolan, no offense to him. And also, I'm sure Dom's done a ton of research doing the work that he does and would know things like Ariadne is the name of the creator of dreams within Greek mythology, blah, blah, blah.
And so too would your subconscious know that, and then likely name apart that from a bit of learning that was meaningful to you at some point in time. And it would name apart.
We cracked the movie.
Boom.
Podcast over.
Podcast
we figured
over.
We solved it. Fuck you, Christopher Nolan.
It only took 10 years, but we figured you out, bro. So the factoid I wanted to drop that I learned from the lovely Amazon X-Ray was that when Christopher Nolan was writing this movie, he was writing it from parts that he understood and wrote each character as if they were a part of the creative process of writing a movie.
Oh.
So Saito was a producer. Eames was the actor. Ariadne, I think, was the writer. That I think Dom was the director, and then maybe Arthur was the EP or something.
Well, it makes sense. He's writing a heist within the roles that of the group work that he understands. Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good breaking point for me. But if you guys have other things you want to follow up on that idea with, I am all ears.
One thing that comes to mind is who is the target. So originally in the conceit of this dream, it's Robert, this young businessman trying to get his daddy's love.
Right, another exile.
But if he is a part of Dom, that part of him that is feeling without, appreciation, without affection, without, really love. I mean, for somebody that blames himself for his wife's death, for his wife's suicide, as if it's his all fault, it's going to be really hard for him to accept any love. And in fact, that's one of the symptoms of PTSD, is an inability to feel loving feelings or happy feelings. So this may be his effort to help himself acknowledge his inner child, engage with the fact that he is a human being and worthy of some sort of love, and perhaps even why he chooses to stick around with the kiddos, whether or not the top falls.
I'm going to take that. I'm going to run with it, because that just inspired me too. Because also, I think what's really interesting about the Robert and his father storyline is that connecting it with Dom is that right now he is arguably failing his children, right? Like, he is not handling their mother's death well. And one of the few things they talk about within the Robert and his father relationship is how poorly Robert's father supported him through the death of his mother. And so part of it too, I wonder, has a bit of a reconciliation resolution factor for Dom of, even down the road, you can forgive your father and find a place where you still feel loved and connected to him, even when he's really fucked shit up, including how to support you emotionally through a horrific time of your life. One one thing I wanted to say, and then I'll throw it to the break, is that what I love about the actual Inception heist is that it does boil down to something that I think is really true, which is that, because I'm a child therapist, that's my background, is that everything, I believe there's a kid in us forever, right? We could argue that's the part stuff too. And so what I love about this movie is it does make that case, which is that regardless of all the esteem and the money and the prestige and the business and the ego and that this robber person has, that you could definitely dial into, Eames says right away, it doesn't matter. You have to go down to the simplest thing, which is his relationship with his father. Because I think when I talk with clients, so much can be boiled down to, and not in that stereotypical way where people get all up their butts when they're like, oh, you're going to therapy because it's your parents' fault. But it is this idea that, like, so much of what we learn and so much of what is imprinted upon us happens when we're young, when we're figuring out the world.
Yep.
And so how can it not dial back to that? Not in a way where it's anyone's fault, but just it's like cause and effect, right? And so I love that this movie, realistically, I believe, goes back to that idea of, you know, it is the most common denominator is, do you feel love? Do you feel love from your parent? No matter how old we get, I wrote in my notes, we're always children. That pen well-being in the safe, you know, of like, we always want, even if our parents suck, even if they're non-existent, even if they're whatever, because I've worked with a lot of like foster kids, adopted kids, adults that have a lot of different experiences. There's always a part of us that holds longing for them.
Yep.
And wants to be validated by them, even if they suck, even like I said, even if they've been a black hole of nothing for you. And so part of it, so the fact that they connect to that in this movie, I found to be very realistic about the psychology of us as human beings. And I think if you were to incept someone and for it to really stick, it would have to connect to that, because that is one of the most powerful elements in all of our core beings, is our relationship with our parents. So I'll throw it on to a break there. We'll be right back. So getting back from that idea, Ben, I know one thing you wanted to make sure we touched upon is the concept of implanting an idea. Since you are trained in hypnosis, we talked about this. If you really want to get more about this in our Get Out episode from a few years back, we obviously talked about hypnosis in depth because that's a big part of that movie. So if you want more, I would suggest you listen to the episode. But Ben, I'm sure you want to do a little just PSA about implanting an idea for anyone who's nervous that they're going to get incepted and you're going to tell them that the world's not real and it's going to drive them insane.
Yes. And
or make them believe they're a chicken, you know, one of those embarrassing ones.
It's almost always that one. Yeah. I don't know that it's so pervasive. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. And it's why people who are trained in clinical hypnosis and choose to be members of the American Society for Clinical Hypnosis, in their joining of that society and accepting of the training, etc., certifications, must agree not to do show hypnosis because of how harmful that is. And what people don't understand about show hypnosis is that people who would get up and act a little goofy and silly in front of a group of people would probably do it if they were a little inebriated. So
it's more permission, like it's more correlation, not causation kind of stuff.
It's correlation, it's encouragement, it's engagement of parts that might allow them to be a little childish and silly. And some people have that right on their sleeve and you know they would do it. Like if you know me, you know there is a 1000% chance that I would participate in a hypnosis show and let whatever ridiculous nonsense happen, go with it and make it fun. There are other people who would be like, that's a secret hidden part of them they might like to let out but wouldn't tell anybody about. However, the people who would die immediately of shame by having their insides melted out like hot lava if they got on stage.
I shan't be hypnotized. I shan't be hypnotized.
Because you are that person. I am imagining you immolating from the inside out in shame if someone made you afraid of a rubber fishing lure and told you it was the scariest monster you've ever seen.
If I'm ever in a situation where I'm at a magic show, we're already in an alternate reality of my life.
But no, like as far as can a therapist implant an idea into your mind, can they implant a reality? No, right? We can't put something into your head. We can't incept an idea. However, what's important to remember is that when doing any kind of work with the subconscious, you do want to avoid creating an opportunity.
Suggestion.
Was that?
Suggestion, kind of telling the other person what their experience means or what they are thinking.
Right. You want to avoid doing that because, well, you can't implant an idea. You can affect how they might view something, and the idea of like false memories, where there has been studies, and why hypnosis in many cases, like in courtrooms, is not allowed, is because like if someone's trying to say that they remember being abused, for example, like if this memory was produced solely under hypnosis, it would not be admissible. And
so a psychologist cannot incept, but a lawyer can.
Right? See how that works?
One more reason to avoid lawyers sometimes.
Right. But remembering, like, it's absolutely not okay for us to, when someone is in a vulnerable state, interpret something for them and assign meaning to it. It's important for us to encourage growth of their own understanding so that they can confront things that are difficult and, while not completely hidden away from them, may be blocked, and help them understand meaning of it on their own without us telling them, this means that happened to you. You're having this bad dream because somebody touched you inappropriately. You're having this bad dream because this bad thing happened to you. We have to avoid doing that. And when someone trusts you as a provider to use hypnosis, it's very important that you use suggestions. Maybe you'd like to uncover a deeper layer of this memory, without saying, maybe you'd like to remember the time that somebody did something wrong to you. I think that's closer, but like those two things are okay. But what you don't want to say is, maybe you'd like to remember the time your uncle did something he wasn't supposed to you, if the client has not mentioned that. You don't want to incorporate ideas into their head, because false memories are real. So why you can't incept clients having false memories and then parts locking into it is, look, an avenue for me to defend my vulnerable psyche parts. Let's lock into that. That can't happen. Doesn't make it real, and doesn't mean the person will fully believe it, but people will attach to an idea of, oh, that's it. That's why.
It's a misuse of the authority position as the one with knowledge. Oh, well, if my hypnotist is telling me this, maybe they're onto something. Maybe they know something that I don't know. Maybe they are unlocking, because they didn't study the patient, the client didn't study this. So they do depend on those of us who are guiding and supporting them, whether it's hypnosis and dream analysis, or even just therapy in and of itself. We need to be humanistic about it and let the patient kind of be their own expert, and we just act as the guide and get them to ask themselves these questions.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like I made a topic that's clear as mud already, murkier, so I don't feel like I did the best job explaining that.
I mean, I think what you're saying, which I think is true even outside of hypnosis, which I think is also what you're hitting on, Isaac, is that therapists were not supposed to be, they say a bad therapist gives advice, like therapists aren't supposed to be super directive in that way, unless you're doing like, even like CBT work, like you can give homework, but that's not like, you're not telling people who they are and what's wrong with them, like that, yada yada. Because also, especially when someone is engaging in therapy, they're at different levels of vulnerability. And so there are certain clients and certain people I've worked with where I have to be very careful about like every reflection that comes out of my mouth, because I know there's a possibility, because of whatever state of mind they're in, that they're going to take that thought and run with it. You know, oh, maybe something did happen when I was young, or maybe my dad did do that, or maybe da 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 da. And I have to be like, oh, like, you know, like you were saying, Isaac, like they're the expert of their own lives. Like, I be very wary of any therapist who makes a lot of like leaping connections, especially when they're new to you, because I have worked with people where I can definitely tell they've taken something that an old therapist or a life coach or maybe something they read and like ran with it and have really let it, like it did incept them in a way. And it formed a whole feast of ideas off of that one idea. And sometimes even like formed the way that someone thinks about themselves. And then my job can ironically be to get to the bottom of that and dispel it as needed. And, you know, kind of say like, well, what did that idea give to you? More like with the idea of like implanting an idea, like what was so, not seductive is the wrong word, but what was so
intriguing,
interesting, relieving, powerful. Why did that feel good in some capacity to find that idea and to run with that idea? I would probably wouldn't say run with it, but you know, why did that feel so empowering or whatever? I can insert a bajillion adjectives here, but I think that can be interesting. But there are certain populations of people that I work with who they are more vulnerable to suggestion, even just being in a therapy session with me. So I hear what you're saying, Ben, because with the hypnosis part too, like you just have to be careful about the influence you have, but not necessarily that you're going to make someone think something totally an original thought that they wouldn't have had themselves.
Right. You can't, the idea of the defenses, the way that they were depicted in the movie is really important, because someone who doesn't want to think something, who doesn't believe something, will not. Your brain will not let you believe things that are not true.
Yeah. I mean, I wish that was different in therapy. If I could get my clients to believe some of the stuff I'm trying to get them to believe about themselves, fuck.
Yeah.
Well,
so you're making a good point.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could get people to believe things, but it's, if I can't get them to believe things that are true, how the hell can I get them to believe things that aren't true?
Well, it's very similar to how the modern dream analysis approach is, where in, you know, the old Freudian times, we would tell you exactly, oh, you're dreaming of going up and down the stairs, up and down, up and down. Well, obviously, we all know what this means. But nowadays, stairs can mean different things to different people, as well as, you know, floods or even teeth falling out. So dream diaries or dream dictionaries, more specifically, you know, they're very Eurocentric. They're very focused on just the population that, you know, made those initial associations. But you're the expert of your dreams. You're the expert of your life. You've, you know, been with you more of your life than we therapists have for, you know, just a few hours over a couple of weeks. So modern dream analysis, for anyone who's curious or interested in it, or even dream work or dream therapies, it goes about it the same way that Ben was mentioning, that we would just be there to help you ask yourself these main questions. What does this mean to you? What are your associations with this imagery or this character or this emotion and reaction and pattern that you seem to be going through in the dream? And where do you see that in waking life? More likely than not, the dreamer probably has a better idea than any idea that, you know, someone can concoct from their own associations. It's completely independent. Just the same way that we can't enter their dream, we can't read anyone's mind, even though we have psych in our job description.
Correct. And where that line is that we're trying to explain, because this is several hours of graduate school and ethics training that we're trying to impart and cram into a short segment on a podcast to help understand, like, what is one of the more important concepts of being a responsible provider. And like Isaac said, respecting the power we have as the role of an expert, is that it's important that we don't take away the autonomy of the experiences clients have had to assign meaning to them from our reference point, because it might be completely invalid to the meanings clients have assigned to things, and letting them be the expert and use their own lexicon and own definitions of things. A cigar may be just a cigar to some people, but to other people, it may be something else. And that could be nefarious or could be completely benign, but the beholder gets to be the keeper of that information and the utilizer of it. I think it's really important to recognize we have a responsibility, and why it's important to work with people that have ethics training, that they don't give advice, that they help pave a pathway where it's safe for clients to explore thoughts and meanings of experiences from different angles while managing their affective responses but not be keepers of the information and keepers of the healing, that we're empowering our clients to heal through their own means and reconnecting them to it, not providing them with access to them that they have to keep paying us for. That's actually fucked up.
Mm-hmm. And if anybody's have a therapist that you're starting to recognize or starting to hear, wait a minute, this is sounding suspiciously like X therapist here or that therapist there, you are always more than welcome to shop around.
We talk about that a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's like dating. Just swipe around. If you don't like it, you can also tell your therapist, listen, I don't like that A, B, and C is happening. Can you do it X, Y, and Z style? And if they can't, a good ethical therapist would probably say, you know what, you might better, have better luck with this other therapist over here. And if they're like, no, it's very important that you do it my way and only my way, and there's no other ways. Well, that feels kind of culty. And maybe it's best to just say goodbye. Well, within reason, obviously, make sure you're taking care of yourself and have the next therapist ready to go before you go therapist-less for a bit if you absolutely need it.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Hannah, you go ahead, Hannah.
Well, I was just thinking about what are the things that I say to clients to help give them some autonomy in general. And one of the thoughts that came to my mind is I always say to them, I can be wrong. So if this doesn't sound right, or if there's something about the way that I reflect it back to you, always let me know, because it's not going to hurt my feelings. It's not going to, I need to know. If it doesn't match for you, then it doesn't match. And that's okay, because there's a billion different ways to feel and a billion different kinds of thoughts that we can have about it. So I feel like I was just really thinking about what do I do to help clients, besides let them know too that they have a choice, that like if we have some sessions and they don't feel like it's a good fit, that's always going to be okay with me, I know because I have been really lucky and have gotten really good therapists every time I've had to. But I know that doesn't always happen. I know that actually most of the time that doesn't happen. Based on people that I've worked with. But I mean, that's what I was thinking about.
If this empowers people listening, I fired a therapist myself like this year. And I'm not saying this to shame the therapist. I'm not going to say her name or anything, but because it's like and she didn't really necessarily do anything wrong. It's just we weren't clicking. It became more and more clear that her viewpoint on some things were just in direct opposition to kind of philosophies I have and things that I needed. And I didn't want to do the emotional labor to clear that up for her. And you can decide as a client if you want to do that or not, and I didn't want to do that on top of the other work I needed to do. And so I very peacefully just parted ways, but you can do that. And it's, did I feel anxious doing it? Oh, 1,000%. Did I read the message I sent her about 28,000 times? Yeah. Before I sent it? Yeah. And nothing that bad happened. But anywho, anything else you want to say about Inception before we go into treatment and final thoughts?
I think just the last thing I want to say on it is, because I think I've got it, clarified in my head now, is that it is very possible to implant ideas in people's mind. It is not possible to implant things that people do not want, are not willing to accept and consider, and are not true. People will inherently activate their defenses to reject things that aren't true, that they know at their core. And that's especially true when we're trying to, I see this with young career therapists, when they try to absolve people of faults in a situation that they feel guilty about, that they know are facts. And I think that's an important angle that we haven't talked about on the show enough, is that you can't absolve people of faults they know they have. And it works both ways. You can't tell them things that aren't true and infect an idea in their head that their father loved them and wanted them to break up their company, when that is most certainly not true. Their father wanted them to be a spitting image of them. And you can't tell them they don't have fault when they did, but you can adjust the way that they think about that thought. Like, okay, maybe my father would have wanted this, but is this what I want? And do I need to adhere to the world my father wanted, or am I allowed to see my own world and operate in the way that I see fit? And in the same way of, do I have fault? And even though I had some degree of fault in the loss of X, Y, or Z person's life, job, etc. Am I the sole cause of that? Are there other factors that contribute? And is it appropriate for me to have as much guilt as I'm holding? You don't try to take the guilt away, but it is possible to add to the perspective. So a trained and licensed therapist is going to be able to navigate those barriers where we often get friends that say like, well, that's just not your fault. You just got to let that go. And you go like, super duper, I'm all better now. That worked for everybody, right? Oh yeah, Isaac is blowing it off his hands, like all gone. It works so well for all of us. Like, we'll just forget about it. Thank you.
You cured me.
You cured.
Why didn't I think of that?
I hadn't thought of that one. Like, just stop thinking about it. My God. So, is Inception at its core real? I think no, but it responsibly managing the influence you have and the ability to implant ideas which are infectious. I think that is that's something to be mindful of. So the yes and the no.
All right. So we will take another break here and be right back. So with the treatment portion, we've kind of touched upon a lot of treatment in this discussion. Does anyone have any specific characters, and anyone can jump on this, that they would like to do a specific approach with in their office? I think the only thing I would add as someone who's done a lot of family work in child therapy is I didn't like it when Dom was calling his kids home and you can hear that their grandmother, who I get it, it's Maul's mother. She's probably going to she has her own trauma that she is or is not dealing with, is like telling these kids things that are really bad that one, kids don't need to know. And that two, it's just her not dealing. Anyway. So I just thought it would be interesting. Let's say if it is real, I know we've been positing as if this is all Dom's internal world, but if it is real, he now is back at home. He's back with the grandparents, which are his deceased wife's parents specifically. They have been doing a lot of the primary caretaking of his children. I don't know what now the parenting situation is going to look like, because he strikes me as someone, no offense, who might need a decent amount of support, especially if he keeps doing this kind of work. My hope is that post this, he's made it sound like this is his one last job. Who knows? That maybe he settles down and maybe he starts teaching architecture. I don't know. But I'm making a whole fan fiction in my head right now. But, my assumption is going to be like the grandparents and him are going to have to be doing some version of co-parenting probably for the rest of these kids' lives. And so family therapy can be used to do that sort of blended therapy work, which is one, I could see me as their therapist, just helping with the logistics of co-parenting without the kids involved, especially because the kids are so young. Just like, what does co-parenting look like now that you as the grandparents are taking on more of a parental role? And also you maybe did a lot of the sole parenting for a good chunk while Dom was, fleeing extradition. And then how do you civilly co-parent, knowing that you're all harboring your own initial feelings about your grief, about the modality of the grief, about the fact of like, did their son-in-law play a part, and what part did he play in her death? And so I think that I just want to highlight that is an opportunity to do family therapy, not necessarily to work on the relationship between them in the more of like way we think of family therapy, but more about like, how do we co-parent in a way that helps the children? And so if I were to work with them, maybe how I'd get buy-in from the mother-in-law, who I feel like has a lot of thoughts going on, understandably so, is can we prioritize the kids, giving them a stable household, and can we put some of our own personal feelings on a shelf in these moments when we're trying to make the kids have a calm living situation? So that's my only additional rando treatment idea I had, because it's hard to think about treatment in this idea where so much is hypothetical.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's okay. I think I'm going to go next just because I very much thought about that very similar thing of like doing like almost like reintegration therapy with him and his kids. Is what I was thinking about how, based on how young they are, but I even was thinking about them as I was considering it. I was even thinking about what it would be like when they're teenagers.
And they start figuring out.
and they start figuring out what actually happened and maybe putting some pieces together and have the brain capacity to understand the nuances of the experience that they've been either told about or whatever they actually experienced, and what things look like for them. So that made me think of working with them as a family and kind of really, again, helping them manage their grief. Because when everything changes in a kid's life like that, the chances that those kids have properly grieved is probably pretty slim for a couple of different reasons. One, their ages in terms of how they can conceptualize death. Like, I think the boy seems to be younger. James
Like a
seems
toddler.
to be younger. Yeah, like really little. And so he wouldn't have the capacity to understand things at that time. So it would be a lot different when they're teenagers, and have a better sense of those things. And I think that's when he would have a really hard time with them. And really and again, and it would depend on the work that like Brittany did with the grandparents, because that has a big part in how they would maybe see their dad.
The narrative of their mom and their dad, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I can't remember if I was going to say anything else.
May I jump in here? And if you think of anything, you can jump on
go
that.
ahead.
So I'm going to blend a bit of both the parent-child therapy as well as some individual and more dream-based work, which are kind of my main specialties. I also work with kids, but in the context of parent-child interaction therapy, or PCIT, because at this time, the kids very much need some attention, need some one-on-one time with their dad, with the remaining, direct parent. And in doing so, can get a sense of safety, a sense of security and stability in what understandably is a very chaotic time in a kid's life. So I would work with Dom and his kids in order for Dom to join the kids in their play, in their dream world, but in waking life, and follow their direction and promote the kind of behavior that you would like to see: sharing, communicating, even emotion control. Some things that definitely, Dom and many of the other adult characters in this movie could benefit from. And at the same time, I would love to work with Dom in perhaps some imagery rehearsal therapy, where we would take, maybe if this was one of his major dreams that he was having, or the dreams of Mal that he recurrently has over and over again. It always goes the same way, and it always terrifies him so much he has to run away and hide this part away. This is something that maybe not I would incept in him, because I can't, but I would work with him and essentially re-script what this dream would be, just like most reoccurring nightmares or even post-traumatic nightmares, starting from that same neutral beginning, but then instead of going in the negative direction, he chooses and rewrites it in either a positive or at least a neutral direction, and then rehearses and rehearses and rehearses, so that perhaps the dream starts to change. And whatever that waking life pattern is also can start to change.
I think that's phenomenal insight. And I love that you guys are looking at the family members. I'm going to pick up the trend here. I'm going to talk about the character we haven't talked about much, with the another usual brilliant performance. There's two that stick out in my mind, being Saito, who would almost certainly need therapy, but also I think the biggest opportunity to make change would be, it doesn't seem like it happened at all, would be getting Mal therapy after they come up. Because,
yeah, I mean, I had some questions about like the whole plot, like plan of her death, like getting cleared by 3 psychiatrists. Like, you don't have to get in the weeds in that, but I don't know how that would fly. But anyway, go ahead.
Well,
not to like swerve on you.
No, people who, I mean, it does echo the realism that people who want to commit suicide are going to do it, and there is absolutely nothing even qualified professionals can do to stop it, because they will not tell us the truth. And They can construct a narrative and construct a part that can tell us whatever truth they need it to make their plan happen. I have experienced that and had seen it. Just was completely deceived that someone was in that place, and then they were. Well, fortunately, didn't issue any clear mental bills of health or anything, but I think getting Mal some therapy would have been helpful, and helping, like, having someone meet her where she's at, if she were willing. Because if she was really where she has presented to have been, I don't know that therapy would have been any good, to be completely honest, because she was quite clearly decided what she was going to do, that her world was not real, and that this is the choice she was going to make. And the thing I want to say, to try to illustrate some of the harsh realism of dealing with when people are truly suicidal, is that, like I just said, there is nothing anyone can do, which means it's no one's fault. It's something that happened. It's terrible, it's heartbreaking, it's hard, and it's tragic, but understanding that it is no one's fault, that it is something someone decided to do. A part of them got hopeless and believed that there was no other way out. Like, I know it's something I've asked on this show before. It's something I'll talk to clients about, is understanding that there is a part of you that already knows what you would do if you were trapped on the 100th floor of a burning building, whether you would jump or burn, when those become your only choices. There is a part of you that already knows what you would do. I'm going to burn trying to run down the stairs, or I'm calling and I'm jumping because I'm not going to burn. There's a part of you that already knows inside of you biologically. We are pre-programmed with something that tells us when the game has been called and a choice must be made to get ourselves out of pain. And Mal made hers. But if treatment could have been handed to her to help her and meet her where she's at, that she doesn't have to explain this whole experience that she had, that is unexplainable. I think there is a very powerful story for a therapist to pick up on there, that clients we encounter will have stories that to them feel so beyond belief, so unique, and maybe that no one can understand them, that no one can hold the space for their story, that no one will believe them or understand the gravity of it. But that's not a real thing. Therapists who are skilled and a good fit for a client. Now, you can, like Isaac said, shop around, find a therapist that resonates with you, because I had a young person approach me at the con talking about this very issue, which might be why it's on me and Brittany's brain today, is asking about how you go about switching therapists, because that's important. Finding someone who is a good fit, but a good therapist for you won't make you explain your situation, but will let you be the expert of it and own the story. And I don't think Mal got that, and I wish that she would have. So having someone have that humanistic space where she gets to be the expert, she can tell her story in a way that she doesn't have to explain every detail or have someone go evaluate whether she's psychotic, but just let her be the expert and tell her story, and that someone connects to her pain, her terror, her confusion, and validates it and lets her emote it safely, would be hugely beneficial for her.
All right, our final break here, and then we'll be back for final thoughts. All right, so this is just the portion where we talk about I always want to think, my thought is always our secular views on the movie, but our non-therapy views on the movie. I love this movie. Christopher Nolan very rarely makes a movie that I'm not into. I just saw Oppenheimer with Hannah recently. We did Barbenheimer, and it was beautiful. I'd never been so stressed out while watching two people in a boring meeting room talk at each other. So I definitely, of course, I own this movie. I'll probably watch it many more times. It's the Nolan aesthetic, executive businessman aesthetic. I always think fun in his movies. It's like his own niche. I love the music. I love a heist movie as well. And this movie, if nothing else, I think is a good heist movie, which is why I will keep coming back. I love a montage where we're getting the gang together and we're figuring out what's going on. When you exposition dump on me, which I also know is part of Ariana's character's role, is to be the exposition dumper or like to have the exposition be dumped through them. But no, I love this movie. I'll keep watching it a bajillion times, if nothing else, for how beautiful Tom Hardy and Cillian Murphy are in it. God bless that they're real friends in real life and they just keep cranking out material together. But that's my thoughts on that. Isaac, if you want to go.
Sure. I mean, I love the movie obviously as well, specifically because it is a dream movie. I love movies that have the dreamy elements. I love this movie. I love Paprika. I love Doctor Strange. That's why I dress up like him at all the San Diego, LA Comic Cons and Wonder Cons. You'll see me there doing presentations on exactly these concepts because they are great narrative tools for helping us discuss these kind of inner worlds that we have. And it's always great to see Ken Watanabe just, do his thing and do a great job. And Elliot Page did a fantastic job. And it works really well because you have these amazing actors and these stunning visual effects that complement their stunning work. So it's always great to just, let them cook.
Hannah?
Yeah, I like this movie. It's fun to watch. I feel like I see something different every time I watch it. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like I love a Christopher Nolan movie. I think it's always kind of what Brittany said. Like it's always just interesting to see what comes out of his head and how he puts it out. And I think this movie is so visually beautiful to watch in general. So I definitely feel like I'll watch this movie more.
I agree with all of you. I love this film. It was instantly one of my favorites when it came out. I forget how much I love it every time I watch it. And the more I watch it as a therapist, the more I see and understand it and look at it with eyes of curiosity and also appreciation for the level of understanding Christopher Nolan and his writing team and his visual effects team and cinematographers have for understanding the human condition at a deep psychological level that they can represent incredibly complex topics like IFS visually and through dialogue, and then hire actors who have such chemistry and ability to communicate these very specific ideas in very specific ways that I think I've only seen him capture. And I love watching every one of these and need to get caught up because small child tends to prevent you from seeing things like Oppenheimer when you want to go out. Like, let's watch a movie about
it's
this.
so good, bro.
Not a 5-year-old thing.
Bro.
I know.
Good.
I need to see the Barbenheimer.
And I wasn't really repping hard for Oppenheimer. I was seeing it as part of Barbenheimer, and I was like, whoa. All right. Well, we'll end on that note. Isaac, if you just want to let everyone know again where they can find you.
Sure. You can definitely find me on all the socials at All Mind Health or All Mind Health 1. If somehow someone's already gotten that first one in. And you can also go to my website, allmindhealth.com. If you're in California and are in need of therapy, you can go there in particular and seek out sessions. We're going to be having new therapists on board soon. So other than that, I'll see you at the cons at hopefully, knock on wood, LA Comic Con coming up. But that's to be determined.
All right. Well, as always, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Popcorn Psychology, Twitter /X at popcorn_psych for right now. Popcorn Psychology at gmail.com if you would like to email us, if you have any messages or requests for us. We also have a TeePublic and a Patreon. If anyone is interested in supporting us in any way, you can get merch, and you can also just get, we have privileges. If you get $50 or more in Patreon, you can pick the movie that we talk about in an episode. So that's pretty cool in my opinion. As always, stay awake, everybody, because we're coming for you in your dreams.